Unit 6 begins with D blues solo number 1. You'll notice a very different kind of accompaniment in the left hand in this solo. It's one that's rather derivative of modern jazz pianists such as Thelonious Monk, Horace Silver, and Bud Powell. And next you play the same right hand solo with a different accompaniment. This time the accompaniment will be constructed out of thirds and sevenths. And then we check in with more harmonization. In this assignment, you'll be given the notation and simply have to identify the chord tones. And we finish the unit with coordination number 6, which tests you on a comping rhythm favored by jazz pianist Red Garland. Wow, you're still in the game. I think a bunch of people probably quit after the first 2 units, but not you. So glad you could stay in it with me. It means you're liking it. And if you stick with it, you're just going to like it even more. You'll just keep grooving, and while you're doing that, you'll learn all sorts of good things about jazz style, jazz harmony, and hopefully about playing the piano. So Unit 6, we've got a very different kind of solo to begin with. I think this particular solo is derivative of Thelonious Monk's piano style. I highly recommend his solo recordings. Solo Monk is a very famous one. It's an entire album of solo performances by Thelonious Monk. Another one I like is Alone in San Francisco, but there are more. So let's take a look at this blues solo in D. The left hand is not very busy. It's sparse. That will create some challenges, which we'll talk about in a moment. Let's start by understanding it. We don't have all of the notes in the chord. So what I'd like you to do before you do anything else is get your pencil out and write in what notes from the chord you see there in the left hand. I've given you a start in measure 1, roots and 7th, and then we use just the 3rd in measure 2. Just so write in 3, and it's root and 7th again. A minor 7th, what is that? Oh, root and 7th. And we hit an F sharp in measure 4 on the end of 2. That's anticipating the 3rd of a D7. So this is very pared down. So go through this entire solo labeling all of the chord tones and see how the harmony is presented in this understated way. Next would be practice the left hand. It doesn't move very quickly. I think one of the things to watch out for is if you practice this left hand part at tempo all the time, you may not be ready to play it with the right hand. So since there isn't a lot going on in the left hand, I think it's actually best to see if you can play the left hand accompaniment faster than necessary. It's a good test. If you have skips, practice them the way we've practiced all skips. Make sure you can get there quickly and on time. So I'm not really worried about the rhythm of the left hand. I'm just trying to move through the chords as quickly as I can. If you can do that, that'll give you the readiness that you need to play this in tempo. Now let's look at the right hand. Let's get in position. Position I recommend for the first measure is like this: 1, 2, 3, 5, and there's no way to slide from E to F, so you have to play it 2, 3 if it helps. Just play them at the same time at first. Now we have, going into measure 4, we have to switch positions. So, and we're going to switch positions on beat 4 of measure 3. So, if you can do that, you've got the first 4 measures. Then some repetition. I don't think you need to change positions until you get to measure 8. Actually, end of measure 7. Get your thumb on that B. I think that positioning should get you into measure 8, and then in measure 9, you've got 2 positions in that measure. And you should be all set for the last measure. Now the phrasing and the rhythm, you can read it, but you will get a lot out of the example recording. The example recording, you'll hear the drums and the bass, the accompaniment, and that'll give you the flow and the continuity. When you're practicing this on your own, without the accompaniment, you still need to have some connection to the quarter note tempo. So if you can imagine the kind of movement you'd be using if we played this as a shuffle. And I'm just going to stay on the D for now. I'm not going to move around a lot. I want to get the arms moving. I want to get my groove happening. Here we go. 3, 4. And if you want to go to G, anyway, that's the feeling you want. So when you switch over to this modern jazz piano approach, kind of in the spirit of Thelonious Monk and Bud Powell, you want to keep that feeling of the quarter notes, even though your left hand is not pulsing, or like creating all of that. You have to imagine it and hopefully project that through the right hand. It's not necessarily easier to play this solo. If you want to play it well, it has to have a beat. How am I moving? I guess I'm doing something like this. What does that look like to you? Oh, notice that I'm just being meticulous about playing that B right on 1, even though the right hand is hitting on the end of 4. Right on on 1. And a 4. Be absolutely precise with the rhythms. Know in your body where they go. Now we have a new version of the same solo. The left hand's going to be a little bit different. Your first task is to study the left hand chord tones. I've given you the information for the first chord, the D7. You have the 3rd and 7th. The 3rd is on the bottom, the 7th is on the top. Notice in measure 2, the 3rd is on the top and the 7th is on the bottom. They flip. We do that because the chords end up being adjacent that way. Another, I think, way of talking about that is to say we're using voice leading to get from D7 to G7, looking for an adjacency. So they flip. We're going to flip back, 3-7 in measure 3. What's going on in measure 4? Well, A minor 7, well, that's the 7 on the bottom, 7-3. Flips again. So make sure you study that. The harmony is important. And this is just a little bit of it. So hopefully you can kind of digest it and not get too overwhelmed. Now, we've got the right hand part together, but this left hand part is quite different. How are we going to play it? Well, let's rehearse it a little bit. I think there's some advantages to having the top note in your thumb. If we were to add notes later, like the roots, that might help you prepare for that. Later on, we're gonna, we could play this solo adding notes on top. If we were to do that, I'd say practice these 3rds and 7s, 5th and index finger. We might add a 9th, and then a 13 to the G7. Take your pick. I think I'm going to start with my thumb on top. And just as before, move through the chords out of time as quickly as you can. That's different. Last 2 measures, play them, get so you can just. And if you play them with thumb on top, you've got to come in for the B7, turn a bit. If you're going to use 5 and 2, you still, there's. Make sure you've got all of that worked out, and this is, more chord practice. This is why I have been talking about chord practice from the beginning, because jazz harmony is vast. You have to be able to absorb the feeling and, in your hands of these chords, and you have to understand how they're constructed. All right, let's see, putting it together. Okay, let's work on this a measure at a time. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll to kind of just focus on the rhythm, I always suggest tapping the left foot because we want to keep the right foot independent for pedaling as necessary. So try to get in the habit of tapping with your left foot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, let's take it to another place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, this is just another independence exercise. Whoops. Woo! It's tricky. Take your time, be patient with it. Another way to practice this is to see if you can sing both parts. Deep da, so deep da da, deep da da, ba da da. I can kind of do it in the first measure. Deep da da, da da da, dee dee da do. Do be do da, be da da, ba de da, be de da da, de do be da da, be da da de da 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 da, de de da, ba do do da. So I'm kind of, I'm singing, I'm kind of moving, I'm covering both parts. I'm kind of consolidating them into one experience. Beep, ba, ba, boom, bam, ba, boom, be dee, da, do, boo, be do, da, hoo, ba, be dee, da, ba, da, da, be dee, da, do, dee, do, be dee, da, be dee, da, dee, 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 da, 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 dee, 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 da, da do do da. So as you can see, I'm using a lot of movement. Maybe go crazy with it. Ooh, ow! 4 and ho! You want to have the same kind of groove going as it's got to have that. And if you want to make that happen with this sparser left hand, you have to replace all of that movement at the piano with some sort of dance. Now, once you lock it in, things will smooth out, but don't be afraid to just move at the piano. And then as you really, digest this, you can put a little more finesse to it. But, let the beat be real, the feeling of the rhythm at first. Once you have that, you'll remember it even as you chill out. And we have another harmonization exercise. This one actually may sound suspiciously like a tune you've heard before. Your first task is to just understand it, which means taking your pencil out and writing in the chord tones. I've gotten you started in measure 1. At this point, I think you know how to practice. You go through the right hand part. Don't try to do it all at once. Work in pairs of chords and then build from there. It might help with this one. Notice that I'm lined up. The middle of the piano is actually right between E and F. If you do that, you know, you have access to both extremes. So that's where I sit most of the time. For this one, the first chord will be easier to play if you lean over on one of your buttocks, the one on the left. And notice, I'm not like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's more that I've kind of made this motion. You know, if you can kind of imagine your shoulders being parallel to the keyboard, I think that's useful. You can practice that, just kind of pivoting from one buttock to the other. Your glutamus maximi. I think I would stay down here. So what I'm doing is I'm shifting. I'm not scooting over. If I sit kind of centered with both buttocks on the bench, I'm here. If I want to get to C, I'm on 1, my left. And I think you could stay there. You probably want to move over a little bit, starting in measure 5. And this is a good thing to practice, how you move at the piano. Now I'm trying to get my belly button kind of lined up with A flat, or should I say navel. My navel is right here at A flat. I began with it at C, but in measure 5, and I can get back there. Now, while you're learning the notes, just slide over, because you're going to wear yourself out. Once you know the notes, so I've just, I've slid over my nose, my navel, right on A flat. Once I can do that, then move back to your, normal position and try a little more. But to get there, beware of the knuckle. Try to get on your fingertip. All right. And after you've done all of that, pedal every chord so that it sounds smooth. bet you're getting good at playing chords now. It's fun, isn't it? I never get tired of it. Okay, another coordination exercise. Your first task with this one is to understand what's going on in the left hand. I see thirds and sevenths. Are we going to do 5-2, 2-1? Make a decision about that. And then, if we can master the rhythm in the first measure, this whole thing will come together pretty quickly. So what we have to do is 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's D dot D dot D dot D dot. If you can do that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So all we have to do is this. So let's do that slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3. So let's do that slowly and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2. So let's do that slowly and count. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay, it'll actually be easier when we're playing the notes. Let's get the forearms involved. Do-do-dow. And just like before, try to dance the whole thing. Etc. Make the groove a physical reality, and then as you internalize that, well, then you can kind of get slick with it. Start by making your motions big, and thereby making the beat big, the groove big. It becomes very real for you. You know right where it is. And then, as you kind of settle down, you'll remember that feeling, and you can kind of get slick with it. 3, 4.